Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to part 4, the final part of our video lessons on the Renaissance. Today we are going to talk about literature. So here we go. All right, literature. Literacy rates increased during this period because of my man, Johannes Gutenberg. Good times. All right, in 1455, he printed the first book. It was the Bible. And of course, we know that this started a printing revolution that would transform Europe. Good times. All right, so let's look at some Northern writers. As you can see, I did not create these slides myself. I want to give credit where credit is due. You can see down there that there's the source right there. Sometimes other teachers may create these PowerPoints that are way better than anything I could come up with. So I see no reason why you cannot benefit from those teachers' excellent efforts. So here we go. We're going to talk about Erasmus in this particular slide. We talked about Erasmus a little bit in a previous video lesson, but I wanted to give you a more detailed examination of who he was. He was a Christian humanist, as we said, but his work, The Praise of Folly, was really fantastic and a good time. It poked fun at people's human flaws, and he believed mankind could improve society by reading the Bible, and that Christianity was about the heart, not a bunch of rules and ceremonies. Okay, he criticized the church openly, and one of my favorites is right here. He often criticized the mindless rituals Christians perform during church services and their ignorance about the actual Bible itself. So they run around thumping the Bible, but they're not actually reading the dang thing. So this is a quote from him in 1527. "It is the chief point of happiness when a man is willing to be what he is, not what others would have him be." I think we could all learn a little bit from that quote. I enjoyed that quite a bit. We are going to examine this primary source in Praise of Folly at some point, probably not this week, but the following week. I may bring him in with the Protestant Reformation. All right, William Shakespeare. We love William Shakespeare. He's an English poet and playwright. Well-known plays include those plays y'all can read. His big influence and impact on the Renaissance was not only that he expanded it to the common people, but also that he expanded what they call the dramatic potential of making characters, of plot, of language, and of genre. He really opened the door. He blew out the floodgates when it came to poetry and playwriting. Very important. All right, so let's take a closer look at him. So these are all his works right here. I mean, that's a lot of stuff. His big theater was the Globe Theater. That's where a lot of his plays were performed. My personal favorite is Where's the Taming of the Shrew right there. It's a real funny play. I know it takes a little while to get used to the Shakespearean language, but once you do, man, his stuff is good. It's funny, man. Othello was also a great play that I think is not as widely utilized as it should be, but hey, that's just me. I'm a history teacher, not a literature teacher, right? All right, so let's take a closer look at William Shakespeare, because he's really important. He basically epitomizes England's contribution to the Renaissance. Let's look at here, particularly over here. His use of language and choice of themes, it was made appealing even to the uneducated. The uneducated. So he was able to spread the ideas of the Renaissance to a mass audience, much wider audience than what earlier in the Renaissance they were able to reach. So that's really, really important in my mind. By the time of his death, the London scene of theater was thriving. Their theater district was really thriving, and this was making England a very important place to be. Now let's talk about Sir Thomas More. All right, we love Sir Thomas More, bless his heart. He wrote Utopia. I think that's great. I'd like to go there, you know. Now, what's funny, see, More was a funny guy. Funny guy. Utopia is Greek for no place. His sense of humor is shown since this perfect society does not exist, so he called it No Place. That's great. I find that entertaining. Maybe I'm the only one, and maybe it's because I'm a nerd. Now, the interesting thing about Thomas More is that him and Henry VIII were actually great friends. He was he served as an integral part of Henry's government, but then when Henry wanted to separate, as I talked about in a previous video lesson, when he wanted to separate from the Catholic Church, More said, no, man, I got to stay with my conscience. I'm a devout Catholic, and I will stay a devout Catholic. And even though they were great friends, Henry still had him beheaded because he would not renounce his Catholicism. So he was beheaded in 1535 at the Tower of London. Very sad. And all of these events are actually dramatized in a classic film entitled A Man for All Seasons. Exciting. So let me give you a little bit more detail about Utopia. See, this is like teacher nirvana. Okay, this is like all teachers want to go here because no one is lazy and all people are educated. Oh, wouldn't that be great if no one was lazy? No lazy students who don't want to do their homework, you know? No, but it's a lovely place that does not exist. But this was one of the more popular publications in the early days of the printing press, so it's very important. Now let's talk about 3 different philosophers and writers. Now these 2 we've already talked about. Christine de Pizan was a woman, actually, and she was a Renaissance writer, very important. Here's some historical context to her. My folks, my AP kids are going to be reading this in class. We're going to be reading an excerpt from one of her works, so you might want to pay attention to this area to give you some historical context for the writing. But feel free to pause the video and take a look at all these things and kind of give yourself a compare-contrast of these 3 very important philosophers and writers. All right, the Spanish Renaissance. Miguel de Cervantes. Love this guy. Don Quixote was published in 1605. And I thought it would be nice to end with some quotes. So here, from Don Quixote, if thou art not versed in the business of adventures, get thee aside and pray, whilst I engage these giants in combat. Too much sanity may be madness, and maddest of all, to see life as it should be, to see life as it is, and not as it should be. These 2 at the bottom are my favorite. If you want to be a knight, act like a knight. This one, my favorite. As you are not experienced in the things of the world, all things that have some difficulty will seem impossible. For AP students, I hope this rings particularly true. As some of you may not be experienced in AP, it seems impossible. But just because it's difficult does not make it impossible. The more you practice, the more you do, the more experienced you become in the things of the world, the less impossible they will seem. I hope you learned what you needed to. I will see you in the next video. Have a good night.